Cinema in minutes. In today's video, we will be going through a war action film entitled The Siege of Jadoville. There will be spoilers ahead, chill out and enjoy. The movie begins with Congolese Prime Minister Lumumba sitting in the backseat of a car. He puts his glasses on and lets out a deep breath. The vehicle in front of him explodes. A group of soldiers waiting for him. They pull him out of his car, take his blazer off, and manhandles him. Prime Minister Lumumba's beaten and tied up when General Moise Tshombe visits him. He tells Tshombe everything underneath the earth belongs to A1L of their people. Not the Belgians or the Americans, nor does it belong to Tshombe. The other man answers that it's one way to look at it, then walks out. A soldier kills Prime Minister Lumumba. In the United Nations headquarters in New York, O'Brien delivers a speech he had prepared regarding Congo. He accuses the countries of standing idly by as Tshombe colludes with mining companies to control Katanga. He points out with the death of Prime Minister Lumumba it is important to send in more peacekeepers to the province. At an Irish pub, we hear Quinlan talking to a couple of his peers about Julius Caesar. He mentions that politicians don't understand tactics while soldiers don't understand strategy, but Caesar understood both. Gorman sarcastically comments that Julius Caesar's in the corner, referring to Quinlan. Sniper pipes up that Quinlan has read it all and knows of every battle fought. Gorman asks if he knows about the real thing. This time it's Prendergast who speaks up. He tells him that none of them do, then informs them that Quinlan's their commanding officer. Prendergast goes to greet Quinlan. They discuss the upcoming mission, with Quinlan commenting that he doesn't think any of them have a clue what's going on out there. At home, while kissing Carmel, Quinlan hears the phone ring. He gets the instruction that he and his infantry will be deployed in Jadoville. Carmel teases him about being excited to go and wanting to find out if he's as good as he thinks he is. He only smiles, pulls her close, and slow dances with her. Before leaving, Quinlan delivers a speech to his men. He states that they're the second wave of Irish soldiers to be sent to Congo and a total of 9 lives have been lost already. He advises them to be proud of accepting their mission as peacekeepers, since it's a great honor. He notes that Ireland is a country that has never owned nor tried to conquer another sovereign nation, which is why they were specifically requested to help. Tshombe faces the media and announces that they welcome the UN forces, but with confusion. He asserts that they don't know why they're in Africa since they're capable of looking after themselves, but promise to be thoughtful hosts. He warns them not to start trouble because he guarantees that they will teach them how things are done in Congo. Hammarskjöld confided that he received a call from Khrushchev, who reminded him of the UN's initial refusal to send in troops when Prime Minister Lumumba had requested for them. Kennedy also called him and discloses that they can't do anything in Berlin, Vietnam, or Cuba, but believed that things can be diffused in Congo. He personally requests for O'Brien to go to Congo and end Tshombe's antics. He clarifies that this could lead to another world war, which Hammarskjöld agrees to, but also alludes to the fact that the man who stops it will get a lot of credit. He promises O'Brien that they'll come up with a plan and cites that everyone has a part to play in history, and O'Brien's happening right now. He accepts. Worried over the peacekeepers the UN is sending, Tshombe asks for assistance from General de Gaulle. The man asks him directly what he'll get in return. Tshombe reminds him that it is in their best interest that mining companies continue their operations. If he loses power, then the government may nationalize everything, including those personally owned by General de Gaulle. The man pledges to send 1,000 of his best former legionnaires, which the mining companies will hire as security, but will be controlled by Tshombe. The troop arrives in a UN compound at Jadoville. Prendergast announces that calling it a compound's a joke, as the troop is exposed on 3 approaches, overlooked from the south, and a road splitting in 2. They're wide open. Quinlan acknowledges Prendergast's observation and orders that the men be ready at 6 in the morning the next day. O'Brien arrives in Katanga as well. He meets McKenty and Raja. Back at the UN headquarters in Katanga, O'Brien proclaims that Tshombe has crossed the line and needs to be stopped. He authorizes the implementation of Operation Morther immediately, taking aggressive action to reclaim key buildings that are being held by Tshombe. Since Raja's soldiers are the only troops with military experience, O'Brien hints that the rest will be looking to them to set an example and requests for them to show how decisive they can be. Looking at their provision, Quinlan decides it's time to gather supplies. At the shop, Madame Lafontaine boldly informs Quinlan that their troop is not welcome in Katanga. He asks why, and she points out that the people aren't happy with how things are working out, especially when Prime Minister Lumumba took over. She explains that nationalizing the minerals and throwing out the mining companies after making money for decades wasn't very smart of him. At a local bar, Fawkes invite Quinlan to have a drink of a French cognac with him. He joins him and Fawkes inquire what he's doing in Katanga. Quinlan answers that he's protecting the locals from a man who stole power, while Fawkes replies that he's protecting the interest of the mines. Quinlan visits the house close to their compound and finds out that it's owned by Madame LaFontaine. He asks if it's possible to use her phone to place a call to Ireland. She tells him that it's not for military use, but he corrects her by telling her that it's a personal call for his family. She allows him. As he finishes his call, Quinlan goes to thank Madame LaFontaine and finds out from her that Jadoville has the largest uranium deposits in the world. He realizes it's the reason why they were deployed in this specific city in Congo. When they're back in the compound, Quinlan orders Prendergast to go to Elizabethville and inform McKenty that there's a strong force of mercenaries in Jadoville. He shares that they need reinforcements. Prendergast meets with O'Brien and informs him that Quinlan believes that Jadoville's important to Tshombe and is more isolated than other UN compounds. O'Brien comments that Quinlan must be overreacting, and Prendergast passes on the news of mercenaries in the city. O'Brien's still under the impression that these mercenaries were hired by the mining company and wouldn't dare attack a UN. He assures him that things will be over soon. Unfortunately, Prendergast doesn't get what Quinlan was hoping for. On his way back to the compound, he notices the increase of mercenaries surrounding them. Raja reports that his troop was attacked by a security detail who then barricaded themselves in Radio Katanga. They decided to finish them off with grenades but found out too late that there were unarmed civilians in the building as well. O'Brien declares that it didn't happen and it won't be mentioned to any of the UN dispatches. As the UN troop are observing mass, Sniper yells out that they're under attack. Falk starts firing his machine gun. Quinlan calls for everyone to assume their positions. Cooley criticizes Quinlan and states that he doesn't know what he's doing, and will get them killed after the man ordered Prendergast and the others to head for the south position where no enemy is in sight. To combat the mercenaries, Prendergast decides to board a truck and fire their machine gun. He takes down a lot of them, so Falks order the rest to retreat. The day ends with both sides making plans for the next attack. Falks points out that they were misinformed as they were told that the UN troops were unprepared. He insists that they are easy to attack because they've never seen battle. Quinlan, on the other hand, readies for the enemy to attack them from all sides the next time. Prendergast apprises that they only have 13,000 left for ammo, which won't last long. McKenty finally gets back to them and Quinlan reports what had transpired earlier. He admonishes him for not providing reinforcement after he made the request. O'Brien takes the phone from McKenty and urges Quinlan to stop panicking. He believes that these mercenaries are just desperately holding to Tshombe's failing government. He ridicules Quinlan and advises him to stop making excuses. For the mercenaries' second attack, Quinlan orders Sniper to shoot the man in a white suit who seems to be under Tshombe. Sniper asks if he thinks the man was important and Quinlan tells him that they won't have to wait too long to find out. Falks notices the man gone and orders another retreat. Falks signals for a temporary truce and meets up with Quinlan in the middle of the battlefield. He points out that they are outnumbered, to which Quinlan replies that he sees many dead but none of them are his. Falks argues that the only way to survive it is to let the politicians sort it out. He advises Quinlan to surrender, but the other man refuses. Falks asks for a ceasefire for now so they can tend the wounded and retrieve the dead. Quinlan agrees. However, it turns out to be a trap, and Hegarty spies a soldier getting ready to fire a rocket-powered grenade. The fight resumes. The mercenaries are moving closer and the troop are struggling to keep them back. A grenade falls close to where Quinlan is but fortunately, doesn't blow. Joyce explains that it's a dud as he gets their own grenade ready and successfully hits one of the jeeps carrying the enemy's mortar, which sets off the others. Hammarskjöld has finally received word about those killed in Radio Katanga. He asks what O'Brien's role was and his right-hand man reminds him that O'Brien is more of an academic who thinks everyone will wait for his decision. Hammarskjöld admits they have to acknowledge the actions but shall distance themselves. His right-hand man asks how, and Hammarskjöld reveals that they'll apply blame. O'Brien meets with Tshombe and admits that he'd like to see an end to the conflict between the UN and those loyal to Tshombe and Katanga. The man presses for the UN to recognize him as president and his set up as a legitimate government. O'Brien confesses that it's not realistic. As Tshombe's leaving, he reminds O'Brien of his fellow Irishmen in the field and explains that he didn't forget about them at all. The next day, Quinlan's supposed reinforcements get attacked. He finds out that only 30 men were sent, and not the promised battalion. McKenty informs him that these men will need to pull back since they're under heavy fire from the mercenaries and unable to move forward. Quinlan demands how they're expected to fight with their ammo running out and provisions gone. While assessing their remaining supplies, Quinlan gets hit on the shoulder by Falks, who's using a sniper. Donnelly calls for a medic and orders everyone to keep their eye on the south flank. O'Brien suggests that those in Jadoville be abandoned as they're unable to provide support without losing more men. McKenty fights him on it before they receive news that en route to Katanga, Hammarskjöld's plane was shot down by a jet under Tshombe's control. The troop attempts to contact McKenty but receives no response. Quinlan finally concedes that if they wanted to help, they would have done so by now. Donnelly calls for Quinlan's attention and they find a battalion of mercenaries headed their way. Quinlan decides to have some of the soldiers gather their remaining mortars as well as all the gun shells so they could create a makeshift bomb. As the mercenaries close in, the troops gather and Quinlan gives the signal to set off the bomb, instantly killing those near. They loot the dead mercenaries for their weapons as another group closes in. The troop is surrounded from all sides and more enemies pour in. Prendergast calls for everyone to fall back as the jet returns. Someone shouts that their ammo's out. More enemies approach. A bomb close to their building goes off, then the dust clears. The troop find the mercenaries gone and Falk's approaching, challenging Quinlan to finish things. They shake hands and Quinlan returns to his troop. He asks his men if they should surrender and everyone refuses. But Quinlan goes against their decision and states that it's over. The troop is then sent to prison and sentenced to death. However, a month later, they're released and sent home. When they're back home, McKenty greets Quinlan. He updates McKenty that he's putting all of his troops up for medals after standing their ground for so long in Jadoville. McKenty cautions him since the powers that be would like to bury the truth about the siege, especially after Quinlan made things complicated. Quinlan asks how he did so and McKenty points out that by surrendering he made the whole UN organization look bad. If the troops treated like heroes, then the institution's damaged. He challenges McKenty to court-martial him but is warned that it's not just for him but his men too. He punches McKenty, which O'Brien and his whole troop see. As McKenty walks back to O'Brien, the other man asserts that he was right to abandon the troop or else the world will be at war. Quinlan's entire troop salutes him as respect for standing up for them. The movie ends with him and Carmel hugging tight. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more videos like this and to help the channel grow.